Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Beca Auditorium, either in real life or virtually. Welcome to the third event in our digital webinar series. To get things underway, I'd like to ask Dallas Watney to come up and get the discussion started.
Cool. Atamari and good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Dallas Watney. I am a software engineer here at Beca, based in Auckland, and working in the digital products and services section. So I've been given the honour today to open us up with a traditional Māori prayer to hopefully help us settle in with the kaupapa or initiative today, and hopefully reduce all the noise and excess energy that we're probably bringing in from the outside. You know, who knows, maybe you got cut off this morning from someone. So allow this karakia to hopefully remove all of that so that we can all be within the moment today. So I'll get everyone to close their eyes and we'll just take a deep breath. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. I'll get you to keep your eyes closed. Kia tau ngā manakitanga a te mea ngaro, ki runga ki tēnā o tātou. Kia mahia te hua mā kihikihi, kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, toi te reo Māori. Tuturu whakamaua kia tīna, hui e, tai kia. Cool, you can open your eyes. So that karakia translates to let the strength and life force of our ancestors be with each and every one of us, freeing our path from obstruction so that our words, spiritual power, love and language are upheld, permanently fixed, established and understood forward. So before I expand on the karakia, for our neighbouring whānau who have joined us from Ahitereiria or Australia, I would also like to acknowledge all the First Nations people from the various lands in which you may be joining from today, and pay my respects to your elders past, present and emerging. So going back to the karakia, this particular opening I think is applicable for today's kaupapa around setting the scene and challenging us to come together to have these conversations around the digitally enabling the construction space, and talking about our obstacles and basically establishing a way forward. So, kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Dallas. In 2017, McKinsey published a paper titled Reinventing Construction Through a Productivity Revolution. They saw that this revolution was needed because in the 20 years prior to that, general gross value add per hour worked had gone up 70% in the general economy, 90% in the manufacturing sector, and only 20% in construction. Construction was lagging behind. They listed 7 levers that could be pulled to try and change this, and one of those levers was infusing digital technology, new materials and advanced automation into the construction sector. So I'm really excited this morning to have this expert panel with me today to see how New Zealand is going on its journey of infusing digital technology into what we're doing. There's a lot of hype around. There's a lot of industry journals, there's a lot of conferences, there's lots of talk of digital twins. Is it real? And most importantly, is it making a difference? So joining me today, I have Chris Beasley from Auckland Transport, Jane Henley, who was the Transformation Lead for Construction Sector Accord, Brett Casson from Autodesk, Jess Daly from Beca, and Cameron Hyman from Downer. So before getting into the discussion, can you all just give us a little bit more of an introduction as to who you are and maybe something in the digital realm that you're a bit passionate about? So starting with you, Cam.
Yep, morning everyone. So my name's Cameron Hyman. My role's National Digital Engineering Lead for Downer Transport and Infrastructure. My background is in design, permanent works design, so I actually started working for Beca back in '96. And have been, I spent most of my career sort of bouncing in between design and construction, and I also worked in IT. To explain what my team does, so there's a team of 25 in the digital engineering team. It's split into 2 parts. First part is we support a portfolio of projects where the client has a requirement for digital engineering. And what you could expect to see if you turned up to one of those projects is you would see that there's a model first approach So the permanent works design is done with 3D models. The construction team take those 3D models directly, load them up onto survey controllers, onto machines on site. So we're building from 3D models. Yes, we still need drawings, but we're really focused on 3D models. We as-built the work that we complete in a 3D model format, and that gets handed over monthly, and then the asset data is linked to a 3D model. So that's what you would expect to see on one of our projects. And then secondly, what we do is we work through a series of initiatives that help to fuel, I guess, our digital journey. So an example of that would be digital site processes, so digital permits, things like that. Machine avoidance, where we combine 3D models loaded onto excavators and they can't slew or track into those 3D models, so digital shields. And moving into the asset world, we've just released the latest generation of how we do asset management. Instead of the asset data being linked to 3D models, it's linked to GIS, and now branching off into the maintenance space. So there's a couple of initiatives that use AI. So we're using cameras and AI to automatically detect faults in the road for maintenance contracts, and also partnering up with Rush Digital, who developed the COVID Tracer app, and Waka Kotahi to use cameras and AI to automatically detect site safety observations. So I know that's a bit of a mouthful to get through all that stuff, and I'll hand it off to you now, Chris.
Morning, everyone. Chris Beasley, Transport Designer, Standards Manager at Auckland Transport. So I lead within the organisation the Centre of Excellence for Design. So part of my broad remit is design support, standards, design guidance creation. But something that I've kind of coined the term design intelligence. As a client-side kind of organisation, we start a lot of the processes, kick off a lot of work. And so we're starting on our journey around how do we move forwards with expanding the tools we use, the digital tools we've always been using, into a seamless continuum of work. And you'll see a lot more of this out of AT as we move forwards to try and make sure that when we put something out to market, it's understood that when we receive the data, it can be integrated, that in years to come, when someone wants to know why something was built some way, you can drag that data out of a system without having to go, does that person work there? Where is it stored? That's kind of, I guess, my fascination with digital engineering at the moment, is how we can make this data almost democratic.
Thanks, Chris. My name's Jane Henley from the Construction Sector Accord for one more week. So there's changes going on in that space, and great to be here. So the innovation work stream has finished. We had a bit of a digital program and lots of activity going on, which won't continue, which is pretty sad, but that's just the way of the change of the government. I am glad you started with that McKinsey report, John, because I'm, from the innovation perspective, I'm interested in all of the other 7 aspects, not just digital. So in terms of productivity, digital is one of the enablers to unlock that productivity. There's also skills and modern methods of construction and lots of other pieces of the puzzle to unlock that productivity equation. So that's what I'm passionate about. And I think in terms of the digital conversation, I come from a place of how do we make the case for digital? How do we have digital first? And how do I translate some of the more technical conversations that we might have into something that, you know, decision makers and executive suites and CEOs within government might actually understand and lean into a program on. So that's kind of my role in this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Good morning, everyone. My name's Brett Casson. I head up our entire architecture, engineering and construction strategy for the Asia Pac and for the EMEA region. I've been, prior to Autodesk, I was in industry for over 20 years working in the entire space in high-rise construction and infrastructure and rail, roads and highways. I guess my passion, and I'll come back to what I do because it sort of drives my passion. My passion is around reform. I like to see the industry reform. We call it digital transformation, but actually it's reform, because we can't just look at digital in of itself. It has to drive reform. So what I do, so part of my role at Autodesk is to create and execute on a digital strategy for those very, very large regions, which is very complex. But it's about understanding what's happening in industry and feeding that back into our business that will drive the way in which we develop our applications and platform technologies and the way in which we go to market with what we're doing. And this conversation is really important because not only is it digital, I think as you pointed out, Jane, there's a lot more sort of, it's a spider's web of things that need to happen for us to be more digital in construction. But if we need to look more broadly at how digital will impact New Zealand, or Aotearoa. So it's a really important conversation, but it's a conversation I feel that needs to be led around reform.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Jess Daly from Beca. I've been with Beca about 10 years now, and I primarily work as a design manager. In that role, hard to sort of disseminate it to just a few lines, but it's really about getting the design team to all come together and work towards a common goal. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm particularly tech savvy or really interested in one particular area, but I guess the perspective I'm bringing is I'm essentially on the ground and, trying to make the design team go in a particular direction and get common ground. So one thing I'm particularly sort of excited about at the moment or seeing happen is we're starting to actually see everyone moving a little bit in the same direction, not necessarily as fast or as exactly the right direction we'd want, but starting to see it happen all across the industry. So clients kind of starting to talk to us. We're wanting the same thing, the contractors wanting the same thing, the software's doing what we need it to. So really kind of excited about that, or seeing, yes, we're starting to get change because everybody's wanting to do the same thing, and really keen to sort of see how do we keep that moving and how do we get everyone wanting to move in the right direction or the same direction.
Thanks, team. I'll get one of the big questions out of the way first. I mean, there's no doubt over the last 18 months, AI has really come of age when OpenAI opened up ChatGPT, and you can't go to a conference, you can't read a paper without AI coming up somewhere. From the varying perspectives we've got here, and start with you, Cam, what do you think sort of the real benefits and potential risks with AI from sort of the constructor's perspective?
Yeah, it is a real buzzword, lots of hype around AI at the moment. Look, I think that we'll see the biggest productivity gain initially in the knowledge part of the market. So for permanent works design, I'm sure that will probably come first before we see a big productivity gain in construction. And I guess my reasoning behind that is that permanent works design works in the theoretical space and construction works in the sort of physical space. So to see a massive productivity leap in construction, you would probably expect to see AI-driven robots. But there's lots of issues around having robots on site. You don't want robots and people interacting together, typically. So I imagine with the conversational AI experience in developing 3D models and things like that, much like using GPT-4 and that type of thing. I think the next big thing in AI, which is just coming out now, is the concept of AI agents. So instead of a large language model, having a large action model that's integrated into the operating system. So look up Rabbit OS, and that product, you can put it in training mode. It's actually watching the pixels on your screen and learning what you do day to day. So that could eclipse a lot of the things that companies like Autodesk are looking at doing, I imagine, integrating AI into their products. So that's just a couple of ideas of opportunities. But when it comes to threats, you've got security, you've got privacy, the big ones, but they will get solved. We'll sort them out. I think one of the biggest issues in the industry is around liability. You can't sue an AI. So what's if you got an AI to design something and it fell over? What happens then? So I think although the idea behind AI is great, with lots of automation, you have to think about liability, you have to think about authenticity. So if you receive a CV or something like that, you expect it to be written by a person and not written by an AI. So you've got to think about when is the right time to use AI. And a few weeks ago, I was talking with Engineering New Zealand on a panel on AI, and the big takeaway was putting people first when it comes to automation and productivity gains. So don't just chase productivity gains. We've got to make sure we continue to put people first when we decide what to automate.
You mentioned, AI designing something and then it falling over. So from a designer's perspective, Jess, what are you seeing as either emerging now or what might be coming over the horizon to make your life either better or more risky?
Probably a bit of both, to be honest. But for me, one of the biggest opportunities about AI is if we can get it doing some of sort of the low risk, repetitive tasks that sort of grind out your day and you're thinking, oh gosh, do I have to do that again? If we can get the AI doing a lot of that then will free up the time and the space for people to be thinking about the higher risk or the higher reward, higher innovation stuff. That for me, I think is the big opportunity, is how do we get it doing I'm going to call it the easier stuff, so that we can then think about, what are the harder things? How can we really direct our efforts into that? In terms of threats, yes, we don't want the buildings to fall over, but also I've been thinking about this a lot recently, is that we don't want AI to sort of take away the human aspect and our ability to think, because the danger is if you just say, oh, what do I do? Put it into ChatGPT or Google or whatever, it gives you an answer, but if you don't have that ability to sort of critically question that and reason with it and go, is that actually the right answer? How will we know? And then so the danger is over time that we become so reliant on it that we're losing that diversity of thought and critical thinking to go, well, what is there outside AI? What more can we do? So that would be my one, is don't lose your own sort of independent thought and creativity.
So Chris, as sort of an asset owner and a sort of client, what's your take on the whole AI field?
AI will have substantial benefits for us as clients broadly. I'll start with the threat though. The problem with AI is if you don't keep an eye on what's being produced or what's being checked, people can get lazy and then errors can creep in. So certainly in the state that AI is in right now, it's quite immature for what we would probably look at it doing. So there's a lot of oversight needed. Otherwise it could just run amok, and we can't have that, obviously. But the benefits it brings is local authorities are not, it's universal, are not heavily funded for experts internally. There's generally only a few of us that operate this kind of smart client function to try and keep us on the straight and narrow. Between compliance and design advisory, helping the project teams set up a project, set out the briefs. Effectively focus our experts on the design advisory side rather than the compliance. Now, anybody can fundamentally go, is that footpath 1.8 meters? Is that the radius of that curve correct? We can program AI to do that. We can set the standards in the system and it can do all that and tell us where it's wrong or where it's right. That, for me, releases a huge amount of effort from the people and allows them to focus on the whole of life approach to design, making sure that what we're doing is actually right, that people are being briefed correctly, and that when somebody has a question, they've got the time to answer it.
Cool. Brett, I mean, the whole tech sector is racing to build AI into their tools. Do you see it as a gimmick, or is it going to be a real step change?
Yeah, the way the question was framed, it may be, are we the problem or the solution? I don't know. I'm also shocked that the word trust didn't come up in this conversation. I think AI is predicated a lot on trust. So we are doing a lot in AI. In fact, we've been at AI arguably for a very, very, very long time. In the very early days of generative design, we were doing a lot of work in that space. I think we could chase what we think AI should do, but I think foundationally we need to peel that way back. So when we think about AI from Autodesk, and we have Autodesk AI, it's our thing. I would put it in 3 buckets. I would put it in the automate bucket. So whatever can and should be automated, should be automated. Then I would put it in the augment bucket. So you will be starting to have a conversation with the machine and asking it questions and interrogating. And then the 3rd bucket, we would say, is all around analysis. So is that design compliant? How do you see that design being constructible? I think the big issue that we're going to have with AI, whether it's hype or real, is that if you would see some of the designs that a machine would come up with for a building or a structure or whatever it may be, you'd be quite shocked. And then you would think to yourself, how would that ever be built or constructed? So I think there's an assurance aspect as well. So what we like to do with buildings and infrastructure is we like to assure it. We have engineers, highly paid engineers, that look at things like structure and say, well, that building is not going to fall down. Now, how do you assure that when you have designs that are so far away from the traditional that you just cannot grasp it conceptually? So I think there's a lot of work that's happening in that space, but I think for us foundationally, we peel that way back into what's achievable now. You'll start to see a lot of AI work happening in the background. So at the moment, we've unlocked a lot of what I would regard as machine learning in the back of our foundational tools, such as AutoCAD. So you'll start to do things in AutoCAD and then the machine will say, oh, is that what you want to do? We could do that a lot better, maybe this way. So there's a lot of that happening, which I think will help productivity. It'll help productivity. So look, I think we're going to see robots and I think we're going to see all that kind of stuff. But I think we're an industry that we need to start to be a lot better at the things that we know how to do foundationally, and then all of the other benefits would happen. So we need to be better at productivity and all of those sorts of things before we get into the spot robot dog running around on a construction site. And, that's great. Is that at scale right now? No, I would argue not. But will it be? Absolutely it will be, but not tomorrow.
Does the industry does your industry have a responsibility for making sure people are aware of the risks and it's not trustworthy?
Absolutely. I mean, and this then comes back to the conversation around who owns the AI. Who owns the large language models? Who owns the machine intelligence? Who accesses it? How do we use customer information? How do you access potentially other customers' information as well? Because remember, once you start using this technology, you're using all information, not just some information or a subset of the information. So again, I think it comes back to this idea of how do we ensure trust in the way in which we use it, how we use it, what is it that we're using around the actual data. So I think it's a really important question, but just know that we are thinking deeply about this whole thing around trust. Not only are we developing technologies, and we have I think we have around 100 PhDs of AI architects that are working on all of this stuff, but trust is at the foundation of the things that we're thinking deeply about.
So Jane, does government have a role in keeping us safe from the machines?
There's a couple of things that it's interesting just to add to the conversation. The Digital Executive Board, which is I think officially sits under Treasury, was focused on digital twin, and they dropped the digital twin program of work, tiny small pieces of work, and pivoted to focus on AI. So they are looking at what government's role is in this space, and I think it's around the trust issues and data, right? And ethics and safety and all of that sort of stuff. Of course, everything else is going to be driven by the market. The other thing that scares me about some people's approach to this is, I heard a comment the other day was, oh, we don't need digital engineering and structuring data. AI will sort it all out. So there is a bit of a, problem with people's expectations, I think. So I think we need to still stay grounded and focused on good, solid digital strategies and not thinking it's going to save us.
Cool. Staying with you, I mean, it's been said that, AI is not going to take your job. It's someone using AI who's going to take your job. Do you see it's central government's role to make sure the workforce of tomorrow is ready for tomorrow, or is that something that the industry or the universities need to be leading?
It's definite. It's both. So I think government knows its role in, workforce education and all the workforce development councils and, managing universities and credentialing and things like that. But I think government could do more in providing a carrot. Like if you just think, say, in contracts, what if there was some sort of, how you get points when you're going for a government contract? What if there was some sort of point available if you employ more apprentices, or if you are training people in digital, or so providing some more, I think, incentives within government contracts is something that is another lever that government could use to actually increase skill levels coming through the system, which is not really happening yet.
I have a real issue with this idea that the robot stole my job, because unless we haven't realised it yet, we actually have a labour shortage. We don't have enough engineers right now. We have this huge pipeline of work, and where I come from, across the other side of the ditch, we have a massive pipeline of work that we need to deliver. The problem is we don't have enough people to deliver it. We don't have enough people to design it, construct it, manage it. We just don't have enough skilled trade and labour to be able to do what we need to do. What's happening right now is we're having very highly skilled engineers and architects coming out of the traditional sources, out of university and college, and we're asking them to sit there and starting to draw lines and circles and text and triangles. I mean, this idea that I'm going to go and do 5 and 4 years at university and come out and start drawing lines on a computer screen, we need to move completely away from that. So I think this idea that AI will take jobs, I think AI will enable us to unlock better productivity and do more with what we have, and enable us to have engineers that come out and do engineering, architects that come out and do design and architecture. So I think there's a lot of fear around this, my skills are not transferable, and once this all comes in, I'm dusted. I just don't believe that. I just don't believe that to be the case whatsoever.
So Cam, I mean, Brett mentioned sort of engineers and architects. Now you're more at the coalface here. How are you getting your people on site to sort of swap their hammers for iPads? And is that something that you're having to train, or is the industry-wide bring that skill level up?
I think if you were to look at the construction industry 50 years ago, there was almost no technology, right? And far less people on site. And I think the reality is, if we just zoom in on my team, with the digital engineering team, there isn't a career path for digital engineering. And so what we've had to do is take junior CAD operators and teach them and create our own career path for them. So it was actually quite a struggle when you've got a small team and you're trying to grapple with delivering projects and coming up with a career path to grow people. But we've just sort of been forced to do that. I just want to say back to the point about AI. It's always interesting being on these type of panels. There's like the sliding scale between whether you're sort of bearish on AI, is it going to automate everything in the future, or are you a full bull on it? It's going to automate everything. And I think it's good to recognise the hype in relation to technology. And if you look up the Gartner hype cycle, we've got to be aware that we are in a hype cycle with AI. At the same time, yes, I personally believe it will automate lots of our tasks in the future, but it's just how we get there sustainably. And I just want to make one example. We were looking at Downer, creating Downer GPT, we'll call it. And the first concept was let's automate the creation of bid content. So it was the first idea. Terrible idea for the bid writers. So they heard about it, I was like, this sounds like an absolutely awful idea. So we pivoted and we said, well, why don't we automate the creation of project management plans? So that's an example of something that's invited by the construction team rather than bid writing, which wasn't very popular at all. So we can get to higher levels of automation, but we just got to do it in an ethical way and think about people first. So just looping back to the AI discussion there. So
Jess, in the sort of the professional services environment, are the universities sort of delivering up graduates coming into the business that are ready for this, or again, is it something that you're having to train them for?
I think to a degree, just the next generation, they've always grown up around technology. They're, at 5 years old, tapping away on their phone or the iPad. Whereas, when I was their age, it was like, ooh, there's a desktop that was like big stuff. So I think they're naturally quite flexible and almost trained from a very young age to be not afraid of technology, but embrace it and see how it makes their life easier. And they're always like, the young ones at work are like, oh, I've got this new app and stuff. And I'm like, what's that? So I think they're definitely more open to it and therefore more flexible and open to learning and can adapt to it faster. So I think that's a real sort of positive we're seeing coming up.
Chris, just change direction a little bit here. What is the real value to AT of doing things in a sort of a digitally enabled way?
So As I said earlier, we've been doing digital engineering in its really crudest sense for a very long time now, since the first release of CAD, fundamentally, as districts and organisations before that. What the concept of digital engineering allows us to do is to create a continuum of information flow from the earliest conceived thinking around, we've got a problem. What does that look like? How do we engage with the public? How do we listen to the public? How do we bring in people's information, census data, stuff like that to inform the approach, all the way through to the digital engineering state where we're actually getting designs developed by our partners, and we're ingesting this and looking at it and making sure it's fit for what we wanted, or did we ask the questions wrong? All the way then finally through to the construction, making sure that at the end of construction, we get information back that actually reflects what was built, no longer being a red line marked up PDF of an as-built. No, it's actually a full-blown digital model, which we can then take into the maintenance world, we can take into the operational world, we can then release to the public, to a developer, someone else in the future, to be able to draw upon without asking the question, where is that information? Who created it and why was it there? That's probably the biggest benefit I see around it, is the ability to link our systems, our processes, our tools together with the public and the governance structures that local authorities have, to allow anybody to access data on something we're doing at any time without needing to engage an expert or enter in some form of techno-babble where they get lost in the conversation.
Something I was supposed to do at the start, if you're online and you actually want to ask a question of anyone of the panel, just put it in the chat, and if we've got time at the end, we'll do that. I was supposed to do that right at the start. Right, jumping back to the last question. So Jess, designers are at the front end of this. Are you getting clear briefs from your clients, letting you know what is actually expected of you from a digital perspective?
I'll tread carefully here because I don't want to, cut off the hand that feeds you. But I think essentially it is variable. There are some clients that are, they're really advanced on their journey, and the briefs we get are amazing, and there's nothing you change about them. And then there's some that are starting their journey, and it's maybe needs a few more tweaks. But certainly we're seeing everyone's kind of coming on the journey now. It's no longer what's BIM, what's digital, what's a 3D model. No, I just want a PDF, we're definitely seeing everyone moving in that direction. And if I could sort of distill it to sort of one thing, or one thing that would be for really clients to focus on is it's the temptation is, let's ask for everything, everything's new, we want it all, but really to distill it to what is going to give you the most value, or what do you really need, and sort of then tailor your brief or what you need to be proportionate to that. Otherwise, the danger is you ask for everything, and then you kind of get all this data, and then you're not really sure what to do with it, and you're kind of spending money, and then you've got to pay to keep it up to date as well. So that would be, I guess, my one thing is just what do you really need, and tailor it to that.
So getting a bit geeky, is things like ISO 19650 actually helping that process, or is it just another thing that people want to tick off?
I think once you get past a lot of the acronyms and kind of understand the language, there is the kind of the principles or the heart of it is really good. And I think the good thing it does bring as well is it brings a sort of a starting point or a common framework for people to begin with. Because if you don't have somewhere to start, there's a danger you'll start at a different point on the circle rather than, if there is a standard. Look, it still needs to be flexible and adaptable to your specific needs, but at least gives you, hey, we're all starting largely on the same page or largely in the same zone, rather than one person over there and one person on the other end of the scale.
Cam, Chris mentioned like getting as-built red lines marked up in PDFs, which may bear some resemblance to what was actually built. Are you being told what's expected of you, and pretty more importantly, are you being paid to do it?
Yeah, and I think to Jess's point, contractor will always do what they're asked to do in the contract. So whatever's required, we would hand over. So we see everything's on a bit of a spectrum, all the way from red pen markups to the other end of the spectrum. Working with KiwiRail at the moment, we're handing over 3D model as built monthly. But I think to Jess's point, the realisation and the journey of what we've learnt working with KiwiRail is that the client isn't actually absorbing those 3D models. So they look really cool, and don't get me wrong, you look at them in a federated model, you can see exactly what we have built in that month and how it's going to tie into the next package of work. So it's useful, but actually I don't believe the clients are getting good use out of that. And what we've found is that's why we've transitioned to GIS linked asset data, as the GIS deliverable is far more useful in terms of asset management for the client. But to answer your question, it depends on the contract. We are explicitly being asked to hand over as-built, and we have been asked explicitly for a long, long time.
And if you're asked explicitly, do you price it explicitly? Are you putting a real value on it?
Yeah, I think so. And if you look at your sort of more legacy roading projects, often it can be a bit of an afterthought. And, you know, teams will just set aside, 3 months at the end of the project. And there'll be this sort of laborious process where we have to extract all of the designer's information, and you'll get some poor person will turn up to site, know nothing about the project and try and figure out how it's all built. So it's clear that we need to be delivering as-built during the course of the project. That's the new world. That's the model first approach that we should be engaging with.
So Jane, government is obviously also a huge client of most sectors. How do they sort of set a good example? How can they set a good example of what to expect in the digital world?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's sort of been mentioned a little bit, but saying more than just I want BIM in my contract and having a bit more detail using the standards and, some of the guidelines that have been produced recently, the BIM handbook and value case that NZIOB did with BIM NZ, which we were involved with. Some of you guys were involved with that. That's the starting point for that language. Now it's a matter of kind of getting that into the contracts and getting that into the hands of procurement and people within government. Had an interesting session yesterday. One of the things that actually it was a session in this room a year or so ago. It was the Smart Cities one. And my takeaway from that was that government needed to organise themselves and that there was no kind of coordination across government. And so yesterday we had a meeting. There was about 20 different government entities at that meeting, all sorts of different, from MFE to Waka Kotahi to Kiwi Rail, some of the city councils. And the thing that I saw there was this knowledge sharing across is probably going to be one of the biggest values in that network of what you were just talking about. Like some of the ones that are further along, further mature, they know what they're going to do with their data at the end, and they know what they may have over procured last time, and so they know what they're going to ask for in their next contract. And so that sharing of experience is going to be really rich within that network. And yeah, I know I talked about the Accord stopping. There will still be a version of the Accord, but also this digital network that we've set up since the challenge to me was, coordinate yourselves across government. Te Wahanga have put their hand up to manage that network and continue that work. So I think it's a starting point. Like that meeting was yesterday, and that sort of coordination and knowledge sharing and all of the things we're talking about is pretty early on in general across government, I'd say.
Are there any sort of like real low-hanging fruit that because there's been a lot of talk about this for a while. What are the sort of the early wins that we could get to really show that this could work?
Within government? Yeah, there's talk of whether there should be BIM mandates and things like that. I'd say we're not quite there yet. I mean, our focus has been, as the Accord, taking the industry voice into government and then connecting government back into industry and being a bit of a bridge. I mean, really what I'm seeing is the knowledge sits in industry. And you mentioned just before that, you're one of a couple of people in your team. There's not many people in government departments that have the depth of experience and skills that you guys do. And so I just feel like there just needs to be, at the start of the journey where we're kind of not particularly mature, and if we compare ourselves to what's happening in Oz, we're really at the start of the journey. And so I see the low-hanging fruit being in talking more, connecting more, and having a common vision for New Zealand, and that's what I hope that will start to emerge out of this group.
Cool, thanks.
Just if we don't move quicker, is there a risk of fragmentation across the various sectors around implementation of digital engineering at its highest level?
But AI is going to save it all.
That's true. It'll write the rules for us.
So, I mean, that was a comment that came up yesterday. You know, we have this big vision statement, and it was like, well, what do we need to integrate? You know, like Kiwi Rail's going to do their thing, Transpower's pretty advanced, Waka Kotahi's, you know, setting standards. You know, there's things happening, and so are we going to allow the bottom up to emerge and bubble away, or are we going to try to have a top-down solution? You know, we see in, you know, New South Wales, Victoria, VDAS strategy. You know, we see strategies in states in Australia that are, I think, enabling both. So we're saying we have some agreements around integration and structure from a top-down perspective, but we allow the bubbling of innovation and activity. So it's a fine line.
So Brett, I mean, you spend more time on an aeroplane than anyone else I know. Where in the world has got this right?
It's an interesting question, and I think we shouldn't look at it as in BIM mandates or, you know, who's doing better BIM. I think the countries that are doing this well are countries that look at building in capacity and building in capability in terms of the entire supply chain. And I know that there was a lot of focus, you know, many years ago on standardisation, and one country keeps coming up in that, which is the UK. And I think part of that initiative that drove the UK to standardise was that, you know, their Treasury, Her Majesty's at the time, Treasury said, we're going to cut all spending. We're going to go through austerity. So you're going to have to do exactly the same, but you're going to have to do it better. And you're going to have to do it cheaper, and you're going to have to deliver exactly what we've asked you to do. So, and I was saying the other day that there's this famous statement, which is never waste a good crisis. So they said, okay, great. What we will do is we'll start to bring in standardisation in the industry, because we know that lowers risks and that brings certainty to what we're doing. So I would say, look, I think the UK is kind of the shining light in terms of standardisation and probably delivery. I think there's some countries in Asia that are doing it really, really well. I think Australia has, whilst we don't have a mandate, my argument around Australia is, do we need one? We're doing it anyway. Like, irrespective of whether you say you must, we are doing it anyway. And I think New Zealand is very, very similar in that you can have some sort of mandate, but it's just not going to drive the right behaviours because the industry is going to do it anyway. I think the US is coming along really well. I think the DOTs in the US have had a huge stimulus from the Biden administration. And there's a specific program in the US for the DOTs around digitisation. So they've gotten a whole bunch of money. So they're modernising all of their programs in the United States. I think the Nordics do it well, driven a lot by the agencies. So and I'll mispronounce this, so I apologise. It's Rikswaterstaat, which is the sort of road agencies in Sweden. They were very early adopters of standardisation. So what I would say is look to countries that build in capability and capacity, and the countries that standardise, and they're the ones that do it really well. But definitely I would put US, Nordics, UK, New Zealand, Australia. I think New Zealand, you're actually doing a really good job.
Thanks. And again, if you're in the audience, if you've got questions, please put them in the chat, because we should hopefully have some time for that. Jane mentions the innovation word, which is another buzzword that gets thrown around a lot. From a designer's perspective, Jess, you know, what does innovation mean to you, and are we doing it, or is it just something we throw in our proposals to make us look cool?
I think engineers naturally want to innovate. We're always thinking, how can we do things better? I'm constantly in my mind, how do I do this faster? Why is this not efficient enough? So I think a lot of engineers naturally have that sort of inbuilt to them. They're always wanting to do things faster and better. I think as well, we naturally have to do it, or we're just going to get left behind in the marketplace. As time goes on, everybody wants, you know, people want a better product. They want it faster, and they want it cheaper. So naturally, I think we do have to try and keep up with that demand. Otherwise, yeah, we'll just get left behind.
Cam, in the construction field?
Yeah, I think my vibe for today is everything's on a sliding scale, but I think when I think about innovation, there's real innovation that gives an efficiency gain. So I think of an efficiency gain as, all right, a site engineer doesn't have to work 10 hours a day, they can work 9 hours a day, still going to get paid the same, still bottom dollar, costs on the project are exactly the same, so it's an efficiency gain. A productivity gain is when you make the boat go faster, and that's what we're really looking for, so true innovation. And then I think there's also scale, like there's marketing innovation for us to try and win work, and then there's that actual productivity gain innovation. I think it's clear in the construction industry that we don't tell our stories well enough, and I think we've often for a long time been looked down on, and there's lots of reports saying that the construction industry is screaming out for innovation. It's not wrong, but I think if we told our stories better, people would have an understanding that actually there is a lot of innovation happening in the construction industry at large.
A lot of it gets driven by the tools that we use, and you make these tools, maybe not you personally make these tools, but your company makes these sort of tools. What are you doing to drive innovation? Because you probably sort of set the bar as to what the rest of the industry is going to do.
Yeah, look, it's a great question, and I think it comes back to how you define innovation. I think from a technology supplier or someone who creates platform technology, I think it's table stakes for us to be innovative and create innovative technology. I think the big challenge that we're having now is there's an expectation that the technology needs to do more. And I know this might be controversial, but no one wants to pay for it. It's like, your technology has to do all this stuff, and we expect it to do all this automation and you to do all this AI, but we don't want to pay any more for it, because I think what's happening is, and probably rightly so, technology is becoming a commodity. You can touch it, you pick it up, you use it, it's in your hand every day, it's in an engineer's hand every day, it's in a contractor's hand every day. So I think it comes back to how you define innovation, but the minute you define it, you can then put a value to it. So I think innovation is value, and if I look at it from an Autodesk perspective, when we innovate, we provide value, and it doesn't matter what that is across any of our platform technologies, and we have hundreds and hundreds of pieces of technology. We're always looking to innovate and do better and provide value. And if you can use our technology and do those efficiency gains, and we can save you time throughout your day, then that's innovation to us. But there is a value cost to that. Now, who pays for that? That's probably the more interesting question. Do we pay for it? Does the client pay for it? Like, who pays for this innovation? Because the innovation that's happening in our industry is starting to become exponential. And there is going to be a conversation around value and cost of innovation. What's the cost of us putting this technology on this project that's going to save the client X man hours or X human hours, should I say? Cool.
Just mindful of time, and I want to give you a little bit of time for it. It's a bit of a final sum up. So this is a question to all of you. So is digital living up to the hype? And if there's one thing that you could make happen or change, what would it be? So I'll start with you, Cam.
I think it depends. So when I look at our portfolio of digital projects, we're like in this parallel universe, and yep, the hype is real and it's great. We have people that leave a DE project and go back to a more sort of legacy project. It's not till then that they realise, and that's when you get the phone call saying, I can't believe what it's like stepping back into the sort of the old way of working. And if there's one thing I can leave everyone with, it's we need to drive the industry towards a model-first approach so that the 3D model takes precedence over the drawings. And to all you designers out there that are thinking now, oh, yippee, I don't have to give the contractor any drawings. No, that's wrong. We still need drawings. We just don't need quite as many drawings. But for any modern contractor, they all have a survey team. Surveyors love working with 3D models. They set out 3D models anyway. So if they can rely on that data coming from the designer, it makes us more efficient. We just need to have the conversation about exactly what we need out of the 3D model. So that's why our approach has been, we have this thing called a model versus drawings matrix. We go through discipline by discipline and describe exactly what information we need. And we have a model spec as well that explains the information that we require out of design. So a model first approach being adopted by the client, and the designer is really important to push the industry forward.
Chris?
For us, it's going to be, I was going to say revolutionary. I'll probably shift it more to evolutionary. It's going to make us operate more consistently. It's going to allow everybody who's responsible for delivering something, that's finance, HR, through to the engineers, project managers, be able to access the data. It's going to make things hopefully easier and more consistent for the industry. When we put out a brief, it's going to be consistent. You can price it the same way as anybody else would. That's the value, one of the values that this will bring, and why we're so keen to move forwards. Our main issue, though, will be people. People don't like change. Project managers, engineers, they don't like to do things differently, adapting to new ways. And for us, it's going to be, how do we fund those education pieces? How do we ensure that we bring the people on the journey that need to be on the journey and kind of educate them that this is going to add value to their life? It's going to make things easier. It's going to make things simpler.
Jane?
I'm going to take a different perspective. So I'd like to start, the outcome I'd like to see is that people have trust in our product, our building that we build, right? And so that would probably mean more transparency and quality of our assets. So that's a bit of a tricky one when there's liability involved. But if we just look at some of the stuff that's coming out of the Building Commission, New South Wales, some of the defects and issues that they're having over there in apartments, I'd just really like to see this level of innovation drive trust in our sector, better outcomes, and really looking forward to the future to today start thinking about high performance 2030 ready homes and buildings that, you know, are good for the planet, good for the people at the same cost. So if we can, I know that's a challenge, right? But that's the reality, right? We have to drive that efficiency into what we're doing and deliver a better quality outcome at the same cost.
Brett?
Mine's almost identical. So I have this saying, which is more, better, less. We'll be able to do a whole bunch more with less resource, with higher quality, but with less impact on the world. So, you know, less use of, you know, critical materials. And so it's a more, better, less. So building in more capability and capacity, doing it a whole bunch better, but doing it with a much less impact on the world. The engineering and construction industry is one of the highest carbon emitters, you know, that there is in terms of industry. We've got to do better in that space. And, you know, I don't want to open up a whole conversation around sustainability, but the reality is we've got to do it with less impact on the world.
Cool. Jess?
I think parting statement from me would just be, and it's been touched on throughout the session today, is just around how do we all start moving in the same direction or get the consistency, do the knowledge sharing, and so we're all working towards that common goal. So I think everyone would benefit from that. I certainly know the design team would be ecstatic if we're doing sort of the same thing each project, and I think the contractors would benefit, clients, and then everyone will really. That would be the one thing if I could change.
Cool. Right, time for a couple of questions that have come in. So I'll ask the question, then decide who I'm going to put it to. So how do we solve the problem of everybody wanting to use different software and getting it to talk together? So I'll start with Jess.
AI is going to solve it.
Yes, please, AI. I think I'll lean back on my consistency piece. If everyone's sort of using the same software, the challenges will become less because everyone will understand how to use it and it will all talk to each other, and also Autodesk.
So Brett, okay, a pretty fair question for Brett. So why do we have all these different standards?
Please make all your products talk to each other better.
Well, that's part of the problem. Our own products need to talk to each other better. I agree with you, and we've got a huge focus on that. I don't have a problem with different softwares being used, but I think the problem comes is, and I've experienced this, there's a lot of emotion when it comes to software. You wouldn't believe it, but there is. And I see a lot of, I am an ex-designer using this software. That's my role. I think we need to become a little bit more pragmatic around the use of technology, understand what it does, why are we using this piece of software as opposed to that, and make sure we standardize on it. So I know that this software does this, and the way in which we're going to interact with other pieces of software on the platform is going to be this way. I think where this whole thing falls down is we tender on a project. When I say we, the royal we, someone like a Beca or whoever it is will tender on a project, start the design process with the way that they've always done it and say, right, that's what we're using. And then it comes to, oh, well, we need to now coordinate with this, but now the thing doesn't work and I can't export that and get it into that, and IFC doesn't work and all this. So we just hit all these roadblocks. But I think if we take a step back, sit down, breathe and say, okay, let's take this approach, like a systems approach, and know the capability, and know what works and what doesn't. And I think that we'll do a lot better in that space. But to your point, I agree, we need to get things talking better. And we have a focus on that. We've signed very key interoperability agreements, you wouldn't believe, with a lot of our competitors, because we recognise that we have to do better and we have to integrate better with their technologies and vice versa. And so that's why we've signed these raft of interoperability agreements, because we want it to be better. We know that interoperability is a huge roadblock on some of these projects.
Cool. Right, another one that's another interesting. Should we expect a slowdown in our sector as our people grapple with the transition to adopt truly digital ways of working? So do we need to slow down so that we can speed up? Anybody?
We have a massive pipeline of construction, roads and houses, and not enough people to deliver it. So I would hope, no, that we don't need to slow down, that this will enable us to actually deliver what's
so
needed.
We can make the transition and not lose output.
We should ask the client that one. Do they want us to slow down?
Well, I would take on the view that you would transition over time. It's not going to be instantaneous, switch the button, let's start this now. It's not. There's a huge amount of work in the client space that we need to do to understand what this means. And so we can't just go, yep, new contract out the door, you're doing this now, so everything you've done before is gone. No, it's going to take us a good period of time to change our own ways of working so that we can actually make use of what's coming forwards. So I think it'd be prudent to carry on going, delivering, and then we introduce new things, new ways of working, piecemeal, incrementally, but under a defined goal and outcome, so that everything then, so then 10 years time, we can go, yes, we've got shiny things happened every 6, 12 months, but they're now all linked together. Now we can see it all at fruition, but we didn't actually stop anything.
Right, we are just about out of time. So I think that the themes have been quite consistent all the way through. And I think that the words like trust and transparency is something which I think is going through all that we're talking about. If we can create a more trustful and transparent environment, that will get reflected in the contracts that get written. That will hopefully make it easier to deliver on what we need to do. So a huge thanks to my panel of Chris, Jane, Brett, Cameron and Jess. Huge thanks to Judy, who made all this possible. Keep your eyes open for webinar number 4. That will be coming your way soon. And thanks for you all being here today. Thank you.
Thanks, John.